I was in QA. I understand the problems of QA. And for those of you who are like, what does QA even mean? Well, I guess we probably should start there. So to specify, I was actually software engineer QA. And QA stands for quality assurance. So my job was to test software. Now, QA often gets blamed for a lot of things. And often it is fair, often it is not. It really depends on the people. And unfortunately, there is a big stigma about QA because generally they require less schooling or less rigorous interviews. And therefore you can end up with quote unquote bad eggs or people that really don't understand what they're trying to achieve. But QA is a very important job. It's going through and making sure that the software operates and functions as intended and that you're not going to bring the world down. So, what goes wrong? Well, I want to say the first thing that I generally feel from the people that I've talked to outside of my own company, the feelings that I have within my own company, and that was when I was in QA, even now not in QA, and what I generally just hear online regarding QA. You don't have enough time. You don't have enough resources. See, one of the big tenets of software engineering is you got to go fast. You got to go fast. You have to be out the door. The first one out the door wins, even if you're not the best. That's the motto. So with that in mind, developers are pushing. They are developing new techniques, and by they, I should say management, product management, owners of the company, whoever it may be. They're developing new techniques to push software engineers to push products and updates faster than ever so that you are first to the door, so that you can deliver updates as quickly as you can. Now, it often has been quoted as, oh, well, we'll get the newest features and fixes out to customers, but often it's touted as we need to get this feature out before someone else does so that we don't lose our customer base. Which is fair. Companies need to make money. But if the software engineers are being pushed, QA is really not getting enough time. What they're probably being asked to do is automate. Now, that's an interesting thing because you're a person, you use software, you're not automated. So why automate? Well, speaking having been in QA, automation makes things go faster. There's a lot of tediousness and perhaps you just mess up. In fact, the majority of times where I wasted time or I produced incorrect results in QA were because I was not consistent in my steps. So if I wanted to reproduce a bug, I had to be consistent. I had to actually show what I was doing. So for example, here I am in Star Citizen and I am testing a feature. I am pushing a button and I'm watching my ship come up. Now I could automate that, and I could automate that pretty easily, and that will save me a lot of time. It's a very simple step, so please bear with me. Assume it was more complicated. Assume I had to actually automate all the way coming out from the whole area, coming down here and pushing that dang button. It's a lot of time, and by automating it I can save a lot of time, and I can make sure that my steps are actually reproducible, because what happens if there is some bug where for some reason, if I pushed the button on the elevator in a very specific order, left the elevator, and then pushed this button to bring my ship up, it caused the ship not to spawn correctly. Well, there you go. Automation can be very helpful. It can make sure that you reproduce it exactly. But the problem is, if you're focusing only on this automation, then you're missing out on the most important part that QA does that everyone seems to forget for some reason, except for our managers, who are lovely the majority of the time. At least mine were. That is exploration testing. See, usually you have a step such as log into an app. We would call that a regression test after a certain period of time. You're regressing a feature which has been there forever to make sure that it still works appropriately. And you would have tests around that. Maybe I would say, make sure that only valid characters are allowed, make sure that you can't, well, Not necessarily that you can't, but you get the specified result if you have blank entries on the one or two fields or both fields, right? Get the right result for that. But what happens is you usually don't find bugs there because developers are generally pretty decent at their job. Not always, but pretty decent. So that means when they make the feature, they make it work, because that's how they know when they're done, is when the acceptance criteria is done. So if the acceptance criteria says, I put in my username, I put in my password, and I hit login and I log in, well, yeah, of course. They can't sign up the ticket unless they can show it off. So that's probably going to work. But what's probably not going to work is all the weird shit that people are going to do. And that's found out during exploration tests. Because as a QA, you need that sort of creative mind that generally doesn't come with most engineers. It's a trait that's not as common in that field. Not that it's impossible to find, but less common. And you have to be able to think outside the box. Well, what happens if I hit the login button, but I quickly hit another button? Which you're like, well, when's that going to happen? Customers may do it. Customers may actually accidentally fat finger something. So you have to be prepared for that sort of stuff. That's where bugs are found. So like, for example, here in Star Citizen, let me try something else. What if I call up my ship, go back and pull something else up? Or what if I call up my ship, then go to the freight elevator, and then there's two freight elevators? What if I could run all the way over to the other freight elevator and call that one up too? Like, what? Can I duplicate items by that? Can I call items up here while I'm still waiting and get to the other side fast enough to be able to duplicate and pull the same item up because it's not technically removed from my inventory? So these are things that just don't get enough time in QA. And oftentimes that's why QA gets a lot of brunt of hate, because people are like, did they even test this? Probably not. No, probably not. And to be honest, there are some things which they simply can't test. For example, you take a load test situation. That's a very difficult thing. You generally need live customers because, again, they do weird shit. And maybe one person doing weird shit doesn't really cause an issue, but 5,000? 10,000? Believe it or not, it just happens. Also, when you automate 1,000 devices or 10,000 devices, perhaps you messed up somewhere in the automation, or you didn't have enough time to make it a full client, so you had to make it a light client. Maybe you just didn't have enough resources, so your computer could not handle 5,000 logins for a certain game because it'd have to run the game 5,000 times. So to compensate, you're only testing a portion. And we actually do have a name for that. It's called an integration test. It's not an end-to-end. So you're testing just a section of it. But the problem is, you can see the QA simply usually doesn't have enough resources or time to complete their task. So what they have to do is they have to end up automating as much as they can to try to give them as much time to be able to do exploratory tests and to be able to figure out what else they can be creative about and how they can break the system. Now, when QA has the time, and I try to advocate for that at my company, when I give QA the time, they find stuff. The longer it sits in QA, the more likely they are to find a bug and send it to me. And it might not even be related directly to the feature that I worked on. And oftentimes it's actually not. Thankfully, I'm going to cross my fingers, knock on some wood here. That means I'm doing a pretty decent job. They often find things outside of it because it gets them thinking. And that's the best thing you can have in the mind of a QA. If you have someone who's creative, but also very pragmatic and very logical, because you need someone that can reproduce steps 100%, and then also someone that can think outside that box and say, if I do this, if I go ahead and modify this slightly, or if I do these two things at the same time, what happens? Like another great example, I had a QA agent who came to me and they're like, so if I quickly hit this button and then hit cancel and then hit it again, like this breaks. And it was a actual bug in the code. There was something that we weren't awaiting for, so we weren't waiting on the code to return, but generally it returned so fast that it wasn't a problem. And because they were fast enough to click that button, they were able to find this bug, and they knew it was related to speed, and they were able to catch something before it went out to production. And the thought is, well, why would that be an issue? Because that's kind of a weird thing for someone to do. Well, what if it's also caused by something else? So in this instance, I actually showed that it was related to a report that we were getting from some of our internal customers who were having the button automatically get pushed because that was actually something the code could do. And it would cause a buildup of this bad state in the app, exactly what the QA had found. And it's just because they had gotten creative and they said, what can I do to break the system? With that all being said, I would say let's give QA some break. Let's hopefully hope that in the future we focus more on quality in our customers, which I do see some companies really shifting towards, because, I mean, it doesn't matter if you get it first if the experience is terrible. We've seen that in games. If you ship a game that's terrible on launch, it can be really hard to recover. Hopefully we start giving them time, and let's give some praise to the QA people who are out there and are doing that hard work to try to make sure our apps are good, because often they don't get it. They are seen as lesser in their communities, unfortunately, among their peers, and they have to do a lot of work under a very heavy timetable, which really isn't fair. So if you ever see a QA agent, thank him and then ask him how you can break something, because man, they can get creative and they're really fun to talk to. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed our content, consider giving us a like and subscribing for more. If you're interested in any more topics about software development, Star Citizen, or QA work, just leave a comment down below and we'd be happy to discuss it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video.